Where one sees failure, others see opportunity.
Hello and welcome back to Unlimited Limited, the show where we all work on trying to get better at Limited in Star Wars Unlimited. Today, I have a very special video because I just went to my first Limited PQ down in Bothell, Washington. Very exciting for me as a Canadian to cross the border to play Star Wars. That's very cool. I guess I did that at Galactic, but this was also cool, just a day trip. Not much sleep was had. I figured I'd talk about the lessons that I learned from this and how I can use those to inform my future draft endeavors with this game. So, for those who don't know, there was 110 players, I believe, and all of them started with a sealed 6-packs. You rip them open, you build a deck with those, and that's that. So a big concern that I had going into this was that sealed would be like pretty easy to cheat. And I didn't make a video on this because I didn't want people getting any ideas, but I'm comfortable mentioning it now because I saw how they were dealing with it. So the way, the concern that I had was that for constructed, you have a deck list and there's like deck building limits. You can have 3 of a certain card and you can build however you want, right? So there's limits in some sense and there's no limits in other sense, right? You can have whatever. But of course in sealed and limited, there are more strict limits about things like, what cards you have in your deck, right? Because you have to actually open them there. You can't just bring them with you. So there's obviously the opportunity for a bad actor to come in with, say, a couple of shatter points, and maybe some Charoots, or some other not too suspicious, but like generally would make your deck a lot better cards, just in your pocket, and then just kind of sliding them into your sealed pool. And then during a game, if you're playing against this person, they play, 3 shatter points and Charut and some other crazy stuff on you. That could happen in a legitimate way, so you can't just like straight up accuse them of cheating because maybe they're not. Maybe they're just open crazy. So you always would have that plausible deniability as the cheater. So that was a big concern of mine, how they were going to keep the integrity of a highly competitive sealed event. But I think they did a great job. And what they did was you were randomly sat across from somebody else in their system, and you watched them open all of their packs, and they watched you open all their packs, and then you gave each other your sealed pool and wrote what the other person had. So, and then, you verify, and then you give it to the judge. So if at any point you play something that's like, not in your sealed pool, if your opponent even has a slight suspicion, they can just deck check you, and your exact pool has already been fully documented. So, even if you had some good sleight of hand and slid in a couple of extra shatter points there's nothing you could really do unless, I guess, the one thing would be if the person who was supposed to be taking notes on your deck was either in on it or was not being very vigilant. But I think in a highly competitive event like this, everybody is being pretty vigilant about things like that. So genuinely props to FFG for that. That's honestly a better solution than I thought of. So I feel very safe and confident that nobody was cheating in the deck building phase for this event. So mad props to FFG for that, and I'm glad that I can feel comfortable going forward that they've thought about these things. Anyway, so getting into it, the sealed portion. I opened pretty well, and I ended up building a Talzin green deck, and it ended up doing okay, as we will talk about. Let's get into the list. So, I'm just going to talk about each card individually, probably some longer than others. Curious Flock, as you know, it's like kind of the definition of a C. It's like, maybe a C+. It's like, this is like kind of understated at every point in the game, but it will always be kind of like almost what you need. It'll never be like completely useless, right? So solid card, just as like scaffolding. I'm usually happy to run one in a sealed or draft deck. I opened 2 Karis, which is primarily the reason why I went into Mother Talzin. This is insane. Having one of these on turn 1 is like ridiculous in a game of limited and constructed. This is like a good constructed turn 1 play in Talzin. So even in limited, it's even better. And I got 2 of them, and it's an uncommon. So I was very excited about that. This card is insane on turn 1. It gets you the Force pretty much right away. There's basically no way to kill it unless your opponent it has the initiative and has Crushing Blow exactly, I guess. But even then that happens. But that's not very common. And I had 2 of them, so I could just play a second one. I had this on turn 1 in a surprisingly few amount of games, given how often or how many of them I had in my deck. But even playing them on like turn 3 or 4 is as just like a decent curve, or is just like a decent way to supplement whatever else you're playing. Pretty nice. Genuinely great card, and the main reason I went into Talzin. Minox's fine. Nothing really to talk about there. It's like, it's important to have an early space thing just so your opponent can't like easily run away with space stuff, because even if your opponent's game plan is to go heavy on the space, usually if you ignore space entirely, they'll just roll you, right? But if you play something like Minoc that's like a decent defensive body, that will slow them down enough in space such that you can readjust your game plan to be a little bit, oh, okay, I actually should be prioritizing using my removal on their space units because that's clearly what they're doing, and just use my ground units to take care of theirs because I clearly have them beat on the ground. So cards like this I think are pretty important to have early game. Night Sister Warrior. This is the card that I always had on turn 1, and it is definitely not as good as Karis, but it is still pretty good. If it gets an attack and it gets you the force, if it doesn't, then it draws you a card, replaces itself, and makes your opponent kind of waste their action, so happy to have that. Secretive Sage, also a great turn 1 play. Drain Essence, I'm going to talk about that in a video probably later this week or next week of my cards I got most wrong in my set review. This card's actually pretty good. 2 doesn't kill like a lot of stuff, because whenever you see like a removal spell that you can play on turn 1, you want it to be able to kill basically all of your opponent's turn 1 plays, and this can't do that, right? If they play a Karis or a Secretive Sage or a Gunji or a Yaddle or something like that, then you're kind of in trouble. But that's not the point of this card. The point of this card is to get you force in a pinch, to finish something off, and it's very versatile. It can go into space, which is very important if you're neglecting space like I kind of was. Inquisitor's Lightsaber, great on Talzin, okay on anyone else. I was putting this on Talzin pretty much every time I could because there is basically just no hard removal for leaders in this set. So this, just the +3 health itself, having Talzin as a 4/10 that attacked as a 7/10, but kind of actually 8 because of the -1 effect, like bonkers, yeah. Paleo Star Compass, I had 2 of these. I think this is an underrated card. Now, people are starting to kind of realize it's good now, but the downside of 2 costs for +1/+1 is that, yeah, I mean, that's like not that impressive, and if your opponent points removal at it, you've just got 2 for 1 in terms of resources and cards. But this replaces itself with a card, and a good card usually. You get to look at 3 and take a unit, and 3 is 10% of your deck in Limited, right? In Constructed, for like, I guess, this is a weird way to think about things, but it could say maybe top 5 in Constructed if you want an analogy of like what percentage of your deck you're seeing. Knights of Ren, we all know Knights of Ren is good. It's just kind of it trades into basically every non-Gunji turn 1 play. It doesn't trade into, sorry, it eats. And then especially with Talzin, it actually does eat Gunji as well. Magistrate Scout, that's okay. It's filler. I got a little bit more use out of it than I was expecting to. The Restore 2 definitely makes the math change for sure. So. Maz is also a card that I really wish I had more copies of. I top decked this on turn 2 twice after playing a turn 1 force unit, and that always felt really good because if I play a 2/4 and they play a 2/4 and I have the initiative and I top deck Maz, they don't have a 2/4 anymore, and I have 2 units on the board, and I'm probably going to be getting initiative that turn again anyway. So crazy. Nameless Terror was great. Usually what would happen is my opponent would beef up one of their units, and then I would just play Nameless Terror and exhaust it. I would exhaust their leaders. It was genuine, because every leader in this set, I believe, has the force tag. Genuinely a very good card, and one that I'm not going to say I underrated, just one that I haven't gotten many opportunities to play with, and I'm glad I did this past weekend because it was exceptional. There was one turn in my first game, and I feel kind of bad about this, where my opponent's turn 1 play was Gunji, and I think I played Karis? I don't remember. And they clearly didn't have a great turn 2 play, so they played Overwhelm or Overpower, whatever +3/+3 in Overwhelm is called, on their Gunji, and I just Nameless Terror and exhausted it, so it just completely just ruined their turn 2 play, and I still got a guy. And I kept them off the force, so tough spot to be in for that. I had 2 Outer Rim Mystics, which is an okay card. This was like resource like kind of often. It just doesn't apply that much pressure, but it gets you the force and it'll stick around usually. My opponents did seem to prioritize removing this in ways that I personally would not have, so maybe they know something I don't. Watto was one of my picks for best card in the set at launch for draft, and I no longer think that, but I do think it is very good. This was just very annoying. My opponents would like let me draw the card most of the time, which I think is definitely. I usually prefer to draw the card, although an experience token, of course, in draft is not negligible, but I usually prefer to draw the card, and my opponents let me do that, so happy as a clam there. Crushing Blow was fine. I never had any like crazy turns where my opponent plays turn 1 Secretive Sage and then turn 2 they put a lightsaber on it and then I just Crushing Blow. I never had any of those blowouts, but I mean it did its job. Whirlwind of Power, same kind of thing. It did its job. Particularly good against a Kanan matchup I had because shields, right? Putting -3/-3 just removes that. Size Matters Not was my one out of aspect kind of card, and it was also probably the worst card in this deck. I just didn't really have anything else to do, but it was okay. I mean, it was removal a couple of times, right? My opponent plays like some big thing and then attacks one of my smaller things and just eats it, and then it has less than 5 health, or sorry, less than the difference health, right? And I just put Size Matters Not. Now instead of being a 7/7 with 5 damage on it, it's a 5/5 with 5 damage on it and it dies, which is cool. I also put it on my Minoc once, which was cool. Just started swinging in for 5. It's not great, but it's fine. Same with Awake Inspectors. I usually resource this, but stats are stats. Chirrut, I actually had a Hyperfoil Chirrut. I know, I'm very cool. Obviously a great card. Nothing really to be said here. My opponents immediately, I almost had prioritized getting rid of it, but they were like forced to get rid of it, right? It wasn't really a priority. It was just like, oh, well, I don't really have any other legal plays other than attacking into Chirrut. And with all the force units that I have in my deck, right, this is where cards like Outer Rim Mystic really shone, because I can get the force real easily with this, and then also with this, and with all sorts of early game plays as well, right? So pretty much had the force all the time. And then, of course, with Talzin and a lightsaber, that's a very sticky force threat that can hide behind Chirrut and just decimate your opponent's board, right? Great card, obviously. My only regrets is that I did not have more. Kadu was, again, filler, but it was a stats, and it was stats. And Overwhelm actually came up, I think, once, so that's cool, although it doesn't usually. Graceful Purrgil, I am really, actually, I don't love this card, but I am glad I pulled 2 of them in the sealed pool, just because my space is really lacking, right? Like, I have Minoc, I have 2 Graceful Purrgils, and I have Hyperspace Wayfarer, right? Like, this can put your opponent, stop them in their tracks in the space arena. And I'm really glad that I was able to do that, because if I wasn't, they probably would have been able to just run me down there, right? Because I was pretty much otherwise completely ignoring it. One weakness of this deck, as you've seen, is that the removal is really not that good. I don't have any Shatter Points. Whirlwind of Power can't deal with any bigger space threats. Neither can Crushing Blow. Drain Essence doesn't really do it either. Like, I pretty much just had to put him behind Graceful Purrgil, or like somehow buff up Minoc with things like Size Matters Not. So definitely really glad I had this. It won me a couple of games just to be able to say no to my opponents in space. Or at least you have to take 2 actions in two turns, right? Relic Scavenger, resource pretty often, but base math did change, I think, once or twice with it. Army of the Dead, just pushing damage like crazy. Sometimes if I had like pretty early advantage with Talzin and my opponent looked like they were maybe about to start to turn the corner, just slamming down an Army of the Dead usually solidified that game, right? Because I had a lead, they're, you know, down on base damage for sure, and I just play this. What are you going to do? It's 7 to your base every turn, right? Eighth Brother is ridiculously strong, more so than I thought, and I did think it was very strong. This, when you play another unit, actually came up so often. I figured this was just like a 6 cost 5/7 ambush vanilla most of the time, but I was wrong. This, when you play another unit, comes up very regularly. Just getting in, because like oftentimes this will let you get in for an extra 4 damage. Well, in my case, it was always to the base, or almost always. But like putting this on like Chirrut or Graceful Purrgil, or even itself, or Talzin, is just like so insane. And this card is bonkers and easily first pickable, even though the double aspect. This was sealed, not draft, but you get what I'm saying. And then Hyperspace Wayfarer was kind of my like, yeah, okay, I'll see if I can maybe in a pinch finish someone in space, but I wasn't particularly excited about this card. Good. So, that's the deck list, and the biggest strengths of it are my curve was really good. I played turn 1 Karis or Warrior Secretive Sage almost every game. I was often able to follow that up with a Maz, or Nameless Terror was a very common turn 2 play, exhausting their thing. Maybe Watto. Maybe just Whirlwind of Power, remove their turn 1 play, right? Like, I had so many very good lines, and I didn't need to hit any one of them. I could just hit, like, any of them, right? It didn't need to be a specific line I hit. Any of these lines were good. Obviously, my best line would be, like, Karis into, like, Maz and kill their turn 1 play, or something like that, or having Watto on turn 2 when they have no answers to it is pretty nice as well. Great, yeah, so great curve. I think that's the biggest strength of the deck, and the card quality is also pretty high. Again, 2 Care, Secret of Sage, Warrior. The Lightsaber is really good in this deck. Maz is great, Terra's great, Watto's great, Whirlwind's good, Eighth Brother's amazing, Chirrut's great, right? Like, the average card quality in this deck, or the overall card quality in this deck, is pretty high. I should move my face so that you can see the whole deck. There you go. The biggest weakness in this deck, I'm sure you've already spotted. The removal's really not there. And ultimately, this is kind of an aggro deck, too. There's not a ton of top end. And sometimes just not being able to, like, shatter point your opponent's big thing to, like, swing the base math back into your favor is a really big problem, right? And having no shatter points, having only, like, my best removal basically being, like, Whirlwind of Power. And Whirlwind of Power is good, for sure. But, you know, having no shatter points or anything like that, or no protect the pods even, because protect the pod is great, especially if you're giving Talzin +3 with the lightsaber, right? Like, there's a lot of good removal at common, like Shatterpoint, for example, or not Shatterpoint, that's uncommon, like Protect the Pod, that I could have gotten and just didn't. And that is pretty unfortunate. Another thing that this deck is missing, and I know this sounds like I'm just like complaining for no reason, but Talzin's Assassin is a common, and I didn't get any of those, unfortunately. That would have, and that is also removal at common, I would say. That's like kind of a better version of Whirlwind of Power. It costs 1 more and comes with a 4/4 force unit, like absolutely, right? No old Daka as well, obviously, but that's an uncommon. I'm not bent into shape about that. Really, it's the removal that's a big problem. No Shatterpoint, no Talzin's Assassins, no Protect the Pods. And 2 of those 3 are common, and I did not hit any of them, unfortunately. So definitely the biggest problem in the deck. But other than that, I am pretty happy with this. I think it's like probably, if 5 is average, I think this is like a 7.5, maybe an 8. Yeah, I am happy with the leader I got to play. I think Talzin is top 3 leaders for sure. I'm happy with the Talzin Green. I think is the best version of Talzin in Limited. So generally pretty happy with how it went. So into the games, I'll do this kind of briefly. My first game was Kenobi Blue, and that was the game where I Nameless Terrored their Gunji on turn 2 after they used Overpower. So that was like kind of just an insane blowout that they weren't really able to come back from, and I just curved out after that. So that and then I think something not quite as devastating, but similar happened in game 2. So I think something with Maz. So that was kind of that the player was quite good and the deck was decent too, but I just like curved out so perfectly. So that was a win. Game 2, I played against actually Talzin Green, and they had just like a better version of Talzin Green than me. They did have Talzin's Assassins. They had Craving Power, which is, I think, one of the strongest cards in the set for Limited. The equipment that gives +2/+2 and deals damage equal to its power to another unit. They had, I believe, some Shatter Points, still some Chirruts. Like, they had all of the good stuff from my deck. They had Eighth Brother, but they just also had better stuff. So they had a better version of this deck. Also, the player was very good, so shout out to him there. And I lost that one. Game 3 was... This game 3 and 4 I feel bad about because they were friendly fire in that I came down from Vancouver, British Columbia, to play, and my game 3 and 4 opponents were both also locals at Vancouver, which was very unlucky. So my game 3 opponent was playing Kit Fisto. He's a very strong player. In fact, the practice draft we did the night before on Friday, he went 3-0. He's the reason I didn't go 3-0. We played in the last round and he beat me. I think he was on Kenobi and I was on Cal. And yeah, so great player, and the rematch I was nervous about because I'm like, oh no, this guy's really good and he knows how to play against me. So, but I was able to take that one down. There was one point where he put 2 Night Sabers on his Kit Fisto, which was really cool. Props to that. But yes, I was able to take that one down, which is unfortunate. Again, I wanted all of the Vancouver people I went with to do well, and whenever they get paired up against, when you get paired up against one of them, it's impossible for both of you to, maintain a good record there. So game 3 or game 4 also was against Talzin Green, and it was a Vancouver local as well. And this guy's very good as well. Great player. And so I was also nervous. I think I had a better version of the Talzin Green deck than he did. He did have more removal than me, but his curve was not great. And that's just sealed. No comment on deck building. It was a well-built deck. But yeah, I think my curve just was able to get there more, even though he did have the Shatter Points and stuff. And I think he had a couple of Whirlwinds instead of just the one that I have. But yeah, so the curve got there. Again, I feel bad, friendly fire, but it is what it is. Game 5, I played against Snoke, which was one of my closest games of the day. I think 5 and 6 were both very close. The Snoke player kind of started to build into space in a way that I couldn't deal with. But the Purrgil actually won me that game. I was able to just slam that down in space, and then I was able to put the +2/+2 from the 8th brother on that Purrgil to like stop damage coming through and make it so that if my opponent attacked into the Purrgil, they would be taking back an obscene amount of damage onto their space units and removing some of them. So really graceful Purrgil does get there as a stopgap of like, I kind of ignored space and I need to deal with that. So definitely recommend picking them up a little bit higher than you maybe would expect if you don't have a space plan, because that did win me that game. And Snoke does actually do decently well going into space with things like Exegol Patroller, the 3/1 Overwhelm space unit, and I forget the name of this one. It's a 1-cost 1/1 with Raid 1 and Hidden in space, and it's villainy, so you can do the Snoke thing from turn 1, right? It attacks as a 3/2 on turn 2. So Snoke has a lot of ways to get into space, so when I saw that I was nervous. So at that point I was 4-1. Then game 6 was against Kanan, and that player was very, very good as well. That game was so close. They won game 1, and in game 2, partway through, I almost like kind of in my mind was like, all right, this game's lost. It is what it is. I don't make top 8, because if I had lost that game, I would have been 2 losses, which I believe disqualifies you from top 8 in 110 people. But eventually, but in that game, I just kind of at one point realized it's like, oh wait, I can't control their board, but I'm kind of an aggro deck. I can just go to the base, and I just did. So at some point, I switched my game plan from controlling their board to just racing them, and I luckily won game 2, and then game 3, I did a similar strategy, and I just kind of they had Grogu in their deck, so as soon as he played that, I did have to deal with that. Or as soon as he played Grogu, I did have to switch back to board control for a moment, but then I went back to face. So I did win that game, very close, very skilled player. Game 7 was against a Kenobi deck, and we were both, I guess, 5-1. So the winner of that game was going to make top 8. So we were both very nervous. I was very sleepy. I got up at 4:30 in the morning in order to make it down there. So I was on about 4 hours of sleep, and I had just been playing cards at this point. So it's probably like 10 hours at that point. I was very tired, and I could tell that my opponent was pretty tired as well from all of that focus and that full day, and now this like kind of high stress environment of who's going to make top 8. But just I think I did get quite lucky in that game. I drew the removal, the very sparse removal I have when I needed it, and I was able to take me to victory. So I know I kept you waiting so long, but I made top 8, and that is very lucky. I think my standing was 3rd. If you include breakers and whatnot, but who cares? What matters is that I was 6-1 and that I made top 8, so that's very, very lucky. And I wanted to talk about that actually. So sealed as a format is one that I like in the pre-release setting, and I don't really love in a very competitive setting like this. Now, I did end up making top 8, and sure, a part of the skill with sealed is the deck building component, right? You know, a player who is a very strong deck builder and a player who's not a very strong deck builder go against each other, you know, a certain number of times. The strong deck builder will win more often. I'm not saying sealed is like completely up to luck, but there is like a pretty large luck element in sealed, and it's a card game with a random chance element, right? There's always luck going into a game. That's just a part of the game, but I think sealed adds like a very large amount that sometimes feels a little bit unbalanced. And I think everybody kind of knows this. And for pre-release, that's all fun and good, especially because everybody's kind of reading the cards for the first time anyway. Nobody feels particularly slighted when someone drops like a huge bomb that they didn't pull on them because, oh, that's really exciting. There's like a bomb, and let me read that card. Can I put it into a constructed deck, right? In a very competitive environment is kind of just a feels bad moment. A lot of my opponents, pretty much all of my opponents, were incredibly skilled players. Like genuinely, that was well done, everybody. But there were a couple of moments where in the games that I won, especially early on, I was just like, oh, wow, my pool is just better than theirs. Like, no skill point, like, mentioned, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm a better player than them. I'm not saying I'm a better deck builder than them. I just opened better packs than them. And then in my loss against Talzin Green, it was the reverse. It was like, oh, okay, like, this player is obviously good, but they just opened, like, way better packs than me, right? Like, they had crazy stuff. So I hate to be, like, complaining, especially since I did end up making the top 8. But, yeah, I think that it might be worth some brainstorming to think of a way to make these high competitive events a little bit pull them away from sealed if possible. I don't know if there is a way that you could say do a cap of 128 people and then have 16 pods of 8 for a draft. And then the winners of those, or what would it be? It would be the top 4 of each of those pods go and do one other pod, and the winners of each of those pods make top 8. Like something like that could be a solution. But it's just, as it stands, I don't love sealed as a highly competitive format. It just happens often enough that at the beginning of this video, I was describing the anti-cheat measurement, where you sat across from somebody and then, you wrote down all of their pool and they write down all of your pool. The person I sat across from, who's a lovely guy, his pool was like very not good. He did not open very well. He had a couple of good cards, but I could tell right from the get-go, it's like, oh, okay, I just already have a huge advantage over this player. And I never played against him. But if I did, I was probably going to win, and not because I'm a better player. I didn't play against him. I have no idea. He might be incredible. But just because their cards weren't there. And no amount of deck building skill can make up for just like missing a bunch of bombs or removal or 2-drops, right? Like there's some amount that you can do to mitigate, but it's just such a disadvantage. And everybody kind of already knows this, and I don't think very many people think sealed is like a highly competitive format. And I also understand that it is difficult to do a limited PQ and not have sealed, just because the way that it's organized would make it hard to do a 110 player draft tournament, right? Unless you do that, maybe that sort of thing I was describing earlier, where you have a certain amount of pods and then the top half gets cut, or whatever percentage you need for the day. I digress a little bit. Let's get back into this very exciting thing. So let's talk about the top 8 draft. So in the top 8 draft, I played Snoke Blue, and it wasn't really my choice. The leaders I got stuck with were Rey, which is, I think, one of the worst leaders for draft, other than Anakin and Revan, in this set, and Kylo, which I think is probably the other worst leader in this set, other than Anakin and Revan. I think those are the 2 worst draft leaders in the set, other than Anakin and Revan. And then Snoke, which is, I think, probably top 3, maybe top 4. So I kind of, everyone sitting around me, despite being exhausted, was a very skilled player. Of course, they made the top 8. We were looking at each other's leaders, and I just know for sure that everybody knew that I was going to be on Snoke, because I didn't really have any options. And I was tired enough at that point of the day that I just thought, you know what? I'm actually just going to play Snoke Blue, because my pack 1 pick 1, I think, was Whirlwind of Power, which was a fine card. And if it's not open, it's not open. I've made it here. I'm tired. Everyone knows I'm on Snoke. This isn't going to go well anyway. And I got very lucky, because Snoke Blue was very open, specifically the blue part. Green was a little less open, but blue was very, very open. Unfortunately, I kind of had to be in green, right? I think blue-yellow villain would have been the best color pair combination for me. But if I did that, I would have needed to play Kylo. And of course, Kylo is just like very much not a good leader in this set for limited. I maybe could have made it work, but yeah, I'm not convinced. Good. So let's get into this a little bit. So Curious Flock, I've talked about that already. Now Forged Starfighter is one that I also mentioned. That's the one I couldn't remember the name of earlier. This card is very good in Snoke, because turn 1 you play it, and then you give it an experience, and then if you think your opponent maybe can't deal with it, depending on what deck they're in, then you can just keep pumping it up, and you're swinging with a 6/5 pretty early, right? Kylo Ren is pretty much the best 1-drop that this deck, best turn 1 play that this deck can do, because it can get pumped. Next turn you can pump it and put like a lightsaber on it. Of course, there's the risk of getting crushing blowed, but we just hope that doesn't happen. Because if you don't, you're just going to win that game, right? Like, you play this on them, you draw a card, you buff them, you get in for 1,000,000 damage, it has Overwhelm, so the +2 here is very irrelevant as well. Night Sister Warrior. We know this great card. Padawan Starfighter is unfortunate, and Pelimoto, 2 copies, is very unfortunate. So as I'm sure you can tell by this top row here, I got completely shafted on 2-drops in the draft portion. It just wasn't there. There was like maybe 2 times that I didn't take a 2-drop because I was taking something else, but other than that, there were basically no playable 2-drops. That's how I ended up with 2 copies of Pelimoto, and this ended up being a real problem for me. Forged Starfighter is basically a 2-drop in this deck, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 3 of them are like bad, right? It's just not what you want to be doing. These guys are also all kind of 2-drops, I guess, but they don't count because there's no point in playing these 3 on turn 1, and if you're playing Drain Essence on turn 1, that's also not great. Fallen Jedi is great in Snoke. You can just play him down and buff him. Same with Magistrate Scout, and that means the restore part is a little bit stickier, and of course that can change base math. Nameless Terror, I actually got to play 2 of them in the draft portion, so I was very happy about that because this card is exceptionally good. Praetorian Guard is basically made for Snoke, right? Because you can like very easily play down a Fallen Jedi or Nameless Terror or even Kylo with like a lightsaber on him, and then Praetorian Guard, and it has Sentinel, and whatever unit you're just talking about that keeps getting pumped up is protected somewhat. Supremacy Tie is also great. It can keep getting buffed, although it does perform kind of poorly into the format, depending on what your opponent is in. Like, there's that 3-2 for 2 that if your opponent plays on 1, this is just, like, not what you want to be doing. There's a lot of 2-attack ships that in, like, Kenobi or Talzin basically just kill Supremacy. But nevertheless, it is a good card. Watto is great, although it can't be buffed by Snoke, notably. Crushing Blow and Whirlwind of Power we talked about. Yeah, so this deck had a little bit more removal than my last one, which was nice, although still no Shatter Points. Awakened Spectres we talked about. Drangear Spawn is an interesting one because at pre-release, or before the set came out, I actually thought it was going to be pretty good. It is understated in like a real way. Like, this is a bad stat line. But if you are somehow able to protect it, and Snoke is probably one of the best decks for you to do that because you have things like Praetorian Guard and other things that like are pretty early heavy hitters, then it can really pop off quickly. And then it can also be buffed by Snoke itself in a pinch, if it's the biggest thing on the board, biggest villainy thing on the board. Unfortunately, it never quite worked out for me, and I had to play him one time to soak just 4 damage, which was unfortunate, but it is what it is. Anyway, I don't think this card is quite as good as I originally thought it was, just because that stat line is just so abysmal. But of course, the dream is there. Kadu, once again, stats. Talzin's Assassin, I got pick 7 in pack, was it pack 2 or pack 3? This is when I knew that I was like absolutely for sure in just the correct lane. This made it basically all around the table to me, and this is a first pickable card. So I was very thrilled about that. Genuinely one of the best cards in the set for draft, and honestly for constructed. It's one of them. If I happen to have this in my sealed deck, I might have gone 7-0 instead of 6-1. You never know. Okay, no, but genuinely a great card that I was a bit unfortunate I didn't have earlier, but I have it now. Tried an assault ship. It's fine. Pong Krell, I think, is very strong if you can get him online. It's a very good late game play, but of course starting as a 2/9 definitely is a real downside. Usually it is able to kill something because you attack into like a big thing of theirs, and then it doesn't kill that because it's only a 2 attack, but now it's like a, I don't know, like an 8/3 or something like that, and you just killed something else that has 8 or less power, and then now your opponent has an 8/3 to deal with. So great card, but obviously a little bit slow. Priestess of the Force, kind of same thing. It's worse. Removal's removal. I didn't get any It's Worse in my previous deck either, which is crazy. And the Purgil King was just kind of a, well, I don't really have any other options because, as I'm sure you can tell from this list, blue was pretty open, green was not super open. So I kind of had to make some concessions in deck building, and Purgil King was one of them. I figured a couple of my games earlier in that day had gone pretty long, and Restore 4 would definitely be enough, right, to swing the tide of things pretty easily. So I figured I'd give it a try just as top end. I did play it one time, although it didn't do much for me. Good. So how did this go? Round 1 of the top 8, I played against someone who was playing Kenobi. And Kenobi blue. And in game 1, I was able to just roll over them pretty quickly. Like, I had turn 1, I think Night Sister Warrior, which isn't amazing, and then I played into Fallen Jedi, and I was able to get Nameless Terrors down and buffing my units and with Snoke. And once I flipped Snoke and put Inquisitor's Saber on him once again, I don't even think I mentioned these actually. These pieces of equipment are very, very strong on Snoke, right? Inquisitor's lightsaber is crazy. Kylo Ren's lightsaber is decent. It protects you against like Nameless Terror, I guess. Star Compass is fine, right? Like, these are all great things to put on Snoke, and I did, and it was amazing, and it won me the game immediately. Game 2, it was a very close game, but my opponent was able to, in the very last moment of the game, or like when I was starting to overwhelm them, they top decked Keller and Beck and Priestesses of the Force. And look, I'm not being a hater, okay? I top decked crazy during the sealed portion. I top decked Maz Kanata a few times when I absolutely should not have won those games. But yes, so that they did end up getting me that game. They turned the corner, and then game 3. This is really unfortunate, and it was kind of a sad way for me to lose the PQ top 8, is I drew my opening hand, and I had only 4 drops and above. And then I mulliganed, and I drew my second opening hand, and I had only 4 drops and above. So, unfortunately, I just got completely rolled over in that was a non-game, that third game. And it is somewhat my fault, because as you can see here, right, the early plays really just were not very good. I had 2 very strong early plays, 1 okay early play, right? Forge Starfighter and Kylo Ren are both very good early plays in Snoke. Night Sister Warrior's fine, the rest were terrible, right? Like if you're doing turn 1 Pelimoto, and then you're not immediately dropping like Supremacy Tie next turn, it's not looking good for you, right? And then even if you are, it's still not looking that good for you, because battles tend to be fought on the ground here. I guess that would have been kind of okay, but I never had that anyway. So unfortunately, I did make top 8, but I did not make top 4. Yeah, it would have been nice, even if I did end up losing anyway, to be able to give my opponent a real game at the end and not just like let them completely roll over me. But it is what it is. A little bit unfortunate there, but I got lucky enough times in the sealed portion that I think it balanced itself out well enough. I do think I was in the right deck. I think the draft portion was a little weird just because I was very obviously on one leader and everyone would have known it. But I don't think I would have done anything differently other than maybe taking, there was one point when I took I don't remember what it was. It was a pretty good card. I don't remember if it was a Whirlwind Power or maybe it wasn't Towson's Assassin. Maybe it was Ponkrell over a Secretive Sage, and it's probably right that I was supposed to have taken Secretive Sage there. And that is, that's my own fault, and this is the part where I learned my lesson, and hopefully the next limited PQ, whenever that ends up being and wherever that ends up being, I will be more wise. Speaking of FFG, you guys should do more limited PQs. This was really fun. Maybe one in Vancouver. That could be cool. You guys don't have enough PQs in Vancouver, okay? There's one of them. There's one every set. You guys should have 2 or 3 or 4. I don't know. I'll go to all of them, okay? That's money in your pocket, okay? So, overall thoughts. That's me on the right there. This is from Zulu Games Instagram in Bothell. They were a great store, genuinely super cool. I think this is my first time like at an American game store, and it was huge. It was really big. They had a bunch of rooms. I was exhausted and probably during this picture a little bit delirious. I've been playing cards for 10 straight hours after getting 4 hours of sleep. But I had a great time there. The staff were lovely, and it was clean, it was well air conditioned. Genuinely, massive shout out to Zulu. I will be happily going to any PQs that they host in the future, as long as I can get a ride down. Like I mentioned, not a huge fan of sealed as a competitive format, but if FFG has truly determined that it's like not possible to do draft as the opening format instead of sealed, then I will trust their judgment on that. Like I said, 2 drafts and a top 8 cut maybe. Just spitballing though, don't know. I had a fantastic time, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I'll be there as long as it's somewhere around Vancouver. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Once again, I'm very excited to have made top 8 at my first limited PQ. Would have been nice to do a little bit better in that top 8, but hey, you know what? That's just ambition, okay? That's drive. That's drive for the next one. I will be putting out a video probably later this week, or maybe early next week. That is my cards I was most wrong about in LOF, and that is my favorite video to do every set. So please tune into that one because it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to make fun of myself. I think I've already made the PowerPoint for it. I think I think I did a pretty okay job at evaluating cards. There's a decent amount that I was like wrong about, but I don't think any of them were like I was just like being stupid. There's one where I was just being stupid. Go back, watch the 7-hour video and see if you can find it. But there is one card where I was just very obviously wrong and I just didn't want to be, but I was. And yeah, maybe leave in the comments what card you think that is. But nevertheless, I appreciate you guys for watching. And once again, shout out to all of my opponents. They were all great players. And everyone was friendly too, which was nice. Overall, great experience. If you're looking for that push to go to a PQ, you absolutely should do that. Everyone is very friendly. So thanks once again for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?